All righty. Well, welcome you all. Thanks for joining us. Russell and I will be facilitating or moderating session 4 of the community of practice, the resilience factor. So let me begin by saying we're going to do a disclaimer. Let me begin by saying that this is by no means a deep dive into these skills. Our goal is to provide some insight and let you dig as deeply as you need to or want to. And we hope to use work examples and our own real life examples to help you explore these two particular skills. So, with that being said, we're going to be exploring two chapters today. Chapter 6, detecting icebergs, and chapter 7, challenging beliefs. So, detecting icebergs, let's start with that. So, mastering this skill is an important step in increasing your emotional regulation, empathy, and reaching out scores. Do you all remember those little quizzes we took earlier? Mastering these particular skills are going to help you with those particular things there, the emotional regulation and those kind of things. So, when you are looking at icebergs from a psychological viewpoint, Freud says that our conscious behavior is only the visible 10% of our psyche. So, if you're looking at that iceberg in that picture, that would just be the tip. So, if you think about this, your mind is like an iceberg. It floats with about 1/7 of its bulk above water. So the deeper drivers of our behaviors, about 90% lie submerged in our subconscious or unconscious mind. So if you remember last week prior, we talked about ticker tape beliefs. And ticker tape beliefs are those surface beliefs. Now, these are the in the moment beliefs about an adversity that drives our emotions and our behaviors. Our surface beliefs, the ones that lie on top, hold the key to why we react the way we do. And those surface beliefs float on the top. Sometimes our ticker tape beliefs don't explain our reactions. So when this happens, it means that we are responding to our underlying beliefs. And these underlying beliefs are fundamental, deep rooted about who you are and your place in the world. All right, we're going to talk about how icebergs are formed. So when I was looking for information on this and reviewing the book and looking through things on the internet, there is a podcast and then some information. It's called The Art of Manliness. And they talked about iceberg beliefs. And they talked about how they can be traced back to how you were brought up. So Russell and I was talking a little bit about this. If your dad was this stoic kind of guy and he always would say, men just doesn't they don't show their emotions, that might be one of your icebergs. Or if your mom was like Miss Manners, one of your icebergs might be people who are impolite aren't worth knowing. So one of the examples I want to share is when I was growing up, our parents, my sister and I always said, a person never quits what they start. So if you started playing ball, you finished playing ball. If you started to play at church, you finished playing, no matter if you liked it or not. So growing up, I had that, and I still have that iceberg. You kind of finish what you start. And I don't know if Russell wants to share anything here or not.
Yeah, this was one of those that we kind of talked about. And I can remember as a kid growing up, my dad, think about my dad. My dad's a police officer. He has been his entire life. And one of the things my dad always had, he didn't trust anybody. Being a police officer, he didn't trust anybody for anything. And I carry that today. Like I carry that. It takes a long time for me to get to trust somebody that they're going to do what it is that they say. And it's something that it's been that way since I was little. So it's one of those things that that's an iceberg that you have, is not being able to trust people, not being able to see, the good that people can do. So and that's it. And I think today me and Betty are going to share some like personal stuff, because this gets really deep later on.
Yes. So don't judge us.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that. Don't judge us. So I want to say about that. So kids absorb these messages from people around them about how you should behave. So as kids, we form these beliefs and we form these icebergs, and we take them into adulthood, and then we might take those into we share them so much that our kids might take them into adulthood and share those with their kids. So it's just something to think about. So with iceberg beliefs, many people have iceberg beliefs, and they fall into one of the three general categories. So here are the categories: achievement, acceptance, or control. So if you fall into that achievement category, when you look at failure, you view that as a sign of weakness. And you never want to give up, because if you give up, then that's a sign of weakness. So with them, success is viewed as one of the most important things in life. So anybody ever seen the movie Talladega Nights? So if you ain't first, you're last. So sometimes my husband will say that out loud, and I'm like, ooh, you're just putting too much pressure on yourself. Don't do that. So people that fall into this category sometimes are considered perfectionists, and they often suffer from that tunnel vision that the author talked about. And remember, that's one of those thinking traps. So by using the skill of detecting icebergs, thinking this way, anything less than perfect is failure. And that can often get into your way of being successful. So let's look at the next category of iceberg beliefs. And that one is acceptance. With this one, what matters most is to people who fall into this category is being loved. You're a pleaser. You will please at all costs. No matter what it takes, you will please somebody. So people who have this iceberg belief need people to accept them. They need praise, and they want to be included. And people who hold these beliefs often overreact to those interpersonal conflicts. If your boss doesn't say hello, a friend doesn't call you, or doesn't return a call, then guess what? They must be really mad. So that's that acceptance category. The third one is control. And if you aren't in control, then you're a weak person. So people need to be in charge and in control of an event. If you aren't in control, then you're a failure. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take some time, and the breakout rooms are going to be extremely small, right, Teresa?
Probably only need one.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. The breakout room is going to be extremely small. And what we'd like to do is for you to take the time to kind of look at achievement, acceptance, or control, and talk about which of those iceberg beliefs that you have. Now, remember, you could have maybe one of these at work and one of these at home. They could overlap. You could have all three. So no answer is right or wrong. It's just your belief. So, Teresa, with that being said, how many minutes, Russell?
10.
10 minutes. We'll talk about that a little bit. All right.
I just hit pause recording, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Everybody's
Looks
back.
like everybody's back. Okay. Don't know if you guys want to share with us. You've already shared with each other, or any highlights of what you talked about. Feel free. If not, that's okay. Okay, Russell, I'll pass it to you.
All right. Okay, so after we've looked at the first part of this is looking at what your icebergs are, at figuring out what they are. Now we're going to kind of look at how they can hurt you. If you look in the book, these first two pieces kind of go together. But first, those beliefs can become, activated, at times that you didn't expect, and lead to emotions or reactions that don't match what the situation is, that don't match the things that are actually happening around you. Then they may lead to emotions and behaviors that they may not be fully extreme, or they may not be out there, but they're mismatched to the situation. So I want to give you a kind of an example of an overreaction. It's kind of when we see people and we say, well, they really overreacted to that. Let me give you a personal example. Walking in the grocery store, I was walking at Walmart, and as I was walking down the aisle, we were getting some chips. Me and my kid. My kid is 9. He was a little younger at the time, and as we're walking down the road, I had just got off work. Knocked off a jar of salsa into the floor. And when the jar of salsa hit the floor, it went up all over me, all over dress clothes, all over that kind of stuff. Reaction, in the grand scheme of things, is that really a big deal that something got knocked off the shelf and it splattered on my clothes? No, it's not. But in the moment, my reaction didn't match what it was. Like, my reaction was, I was much more upset than what I really should have been over what just happened. But I look at that and it's like, it pops up, but in reality, what had happened, there were other things that had happened that day that led to that event. It was other things that had happened at work. It was other things that had nothing to do with that situation. It had nothing to do with my kid. It had nothing to do with anything that was around. But that one situation, all this stuff started building up inside, and it goes back to those things we just talked about. It goes back to those things of acceptance, of control, of achievement, of those icebergs, like the categories that they kind of fall in. And so many times for us in the Frisk world, how many of y'all have problems saying no? That is such a common thing in our world, is we have such a hard time saying no. Why do we have such a hard time saying no? Because we want people to like us. And when we react, and when we do certain things, and we're going and we're helping people, and we're doing this and we're doing all these things, and then something happens and somebody doesn't like you, or somebody that you've done all this stuff for doesn't respond the way that you think they would, then that iceberg starts building up. That acceptance piece starts coming up, and it comes out at the most unbelievable time. Those things just pump out and they come out the most this crazy time that we're going to see. So those are two ways that the icebergs can affect us. But then also there's 2 more. So number 3, iceberg beliefs can become too rigid, which causes us to fall into the same emotional patterns over and over and over. Like, we want to continually do the same things time and time again. That iceberg belief, it just keeps us, and it keeps us trapped in a certain place, and we can only do the same thing over and over and over. Have you ever got mad at something for no rational reason? You just get mad at something, and then it doesn't matter what else you do that day. Every time something happens, you just get mad. It doesn't matter. You can just feel the anger. And I know when I start doing it, because I start feeling it in my neck. My neck starts getting red and it starts going up my head. I mean, I can tell when it's going to happen. But let's say you woke up late and it threw your day off. From that point forward, everything just seems like it just builds on itself, and you just have this same emotional pattern that goes time and time and time again. So we look at that, and we're looking at those, looking again, it's that deep belief. These aren't the surface actions. The surface actions is only what everybody can see. It's that deep down core belief that we have inside of us. If you take it and look, and we did this at my region the other day, my regional meeting the other day, we looked at the piece of the standards. We looked at the community strengthening piece of the standards. We have the iceberg model that we look at. When you're talking about these icebergs on the bottom, for us, it's the mental model that it talks at the very bottom. Like, what is that core belief that's causing whatever we see on the surface? There's something inside of us that's trying to get out. But the fourth way that it can hurt you, that icebergs can hurt us, is when you have contradictory icebergs. When you have two things that don't match, that don't go together, they can make it hard for us to make decisions. So again, I'll give you an example. My wife and I both are, if we're having to sit down and think about things and make decisions, all of these things start coming up. It's like, well, we don't want to do that because of this, or we don't want to go there because we got this. We have all these things, and it seems like we can never make a decision when we sit down and do things. But on the flip side to that, we're also very impulsive, and we'll just go somewhere and we'll buy something, or we'll go somewhere and just do something, just to do it without thinking about it, without thinking and making it too much of a thing. So a lot of times those contradictory icebergs, when they don't match together, make it hard for us to make decisions. I think one of the examples that the book gives us, like a school-based example, is it's a teacher it's a principal of a school who's going to be a superintendent. Thought that's what they wanted. Come to find out it wasn't, because they had control issues, they had acceptance issues, and both of those things kept colliding into themselves, and they couldn't make a decision as it is into what they wanted. So one way to look at this, one way to figure out like these icebergs that we have in our life, is to use journaling. That's a kind of a thing that Betty and I talked about as we were going through this, and the book kind of mentions it as well. Just journaling things. Journal when we see those icebergs start popping up in our life. Journal what ours are. Figure out what is going on, what things are happening around us, and just write those things down. Just putting them down on paper, putting something down that shows us kind of where we are and keeps us going in the right direction. And that's something that you can do with kids. That's something that you can do with students, because think about for us, think about what it is for students. Think about what this would be like working with your students. Think about this would be like working with your families. What is the iceberg belief that we really are going to look at? And we're going to do that in just a few minutes. We're going to look at some of those things, but keep that in mind, especially when we start talking about like journaling. Keep that kind of in mind, that that's a good tool that they can use as well. Okay, so here is, a reaction. Here's something that can be with an intensity of emotion that didn't match the circumstances. When you see dirty dishes in the sink, logically, your mind is telling you that it's not a big deal, but you still feel angry, hurt, depressed, anxious, any of those things, and you can't turn off the emotion when you see those things in the sink, when you see that stuff there. So, example, say child puts the dishes in the sink instead of the dishwasher, but doesn't wash them. You may start getting angry. Again, looking at the big picture, is it really that big of a deal that the dishes are in the sink? At least they're in the sink, not under the bed. Is it really that big of a deal that those are there. Um, but these so looking at the big picture, you probably shouldn't have been that angry, but you couldn't help it. You just couldn't help your emotion. These are called what's called incongruent feelings. Something else that kind of pops up, maybe somebody cut you off in traffic and you're so angry that even after you get home, you can't help but think about it. You can't help but dwell on the fact that somebody cut you off in traffic. So in the chat, we're going to ask you guys to kind of do something. We're going to ask you guys to tell us a time when something happened and your emotions didn't match the action that was going on or the problem that happened. So we'll give you a few minutes. If you don't care, throw that in the chat. And again, Betty and I will give you examples for ourselves. I mean, I told you the salsa story. But there have been so many times in life that this has happened. There's I'll give you one on myself, on me and my wife. We have in our kitchen, we have there's like a little shelf beside our refrigerator, like a little small shelf. We can have junk thrown on everything in the entire house. We can have stuff thrown everywhere on every table. We can have stuff thrown on every shelf, every cabinet. We can have stuff everywhere. But if that one shelf gets messed up, my wife just completely loses it. If that one shelf is messed up, that's the one thing that has to be exactly right. She don't know why. I don't know why, but that's the one thing. It's almost like sometimes an obsessive compulsive thing. Like you got to keep control of one thing. It goes back to that control iceberg that we look at.
Same with Russell with growing up, and it's kind of bled into my family. Was my mom was cleanliness is equated to godliness. So the cleaner you are, the more godly you are in her eyes. So everything needed to be a certain way, pristine. When I was in middle school and high school, I loved Sean Cassidy. I guess I was younger than that, middle school, maybe elementary school. And I wanted to put a poster on my wall. And my mom would not allow me to put that poster on the wall. And I would go to my friend's house and they would have posters on their wall. I wanted to put stuff under my bed. I was not allowed to put stuff under my bed. So me and my sister had this running joke. I'm going to put something under my bed. I'm gonna fool mom. So we joke around all the time. We're always saying, are you gonna put something under the bed because mom's coming to visit? So we'll say stuff like that. So all these different things, and if things weren't clean and straightened, my mom would get really upset. So it's stuff I've had to really look at, these beliefs. I've had to really re-examine. And if you would see my office right now, you would know that it probably didn't work too well with this belief, but it's just something you have to really look at with your families and your parents and stuff.
See, and that was something. So some of y'all have shared some things in the chat, and I hope you keep putting things in. But I want to read some of these. So like Teresa, when Aiden is standing there, Teresa's making or getting ready, just standing over your shoulder, wanting to know when food is ready, wanting to know when everything is ready to eat. Like we got to eat. Jessica doing the same. Jessica talking the same thing with the dishes. They just feel anxious until they're cleaned and put away. Lost and found being the same thing, being the same way. I remember that was the biggest mess as a coordinator was our lost and found. It was everywhere, and it inevitably got brought to my office and was just all over the place. People going slow on the roof, people going slow on the road. I agree. I agree. It's just one of those things that we think of and we see it all the time. Let's see. Yeah. Tanya having trying hard to concentrate on something and people just continuously sending things. Well, had the impulse to throw your mouse on the opposite wall. Well, Tanya, it's good. I would have done that. I probably would have thrown my mouse. I probably would have thrown myself. I'm bad for that. I've done that before.
Oh yeah, I used to get Yes. Russell, I used to get mad when we'd send out flyers for parents to come to events and they wouldn't turn in the flyer on how many people's coming, and I had to order food, and then 16 people in the family would come. And it'd be like, oh gosh, that was always, and I always overreacted to that. At the end of the day, it was fine.
I can think of times. I mean, I can think of so many. I mean, there's so many different examples we can give of times when we just overreact to something in the moment, and we thought that in the moment it didn't help anything and didn't make us feel any better. I can remember one time I was coaching. I mean, it was when I was coaching football. I remember this. We were in the locker room, and some kid said something and smarted off or did something. I don't remember what he did now. I had a water bottle in my hand, and I took the water bottle and I threw it halfway across. I threw it all the way across the locker room and busted it on the side of the door. The only thing that it had to do is I had to go clean up a mess. Is the only thing that it ended up having to do. But it's the immediate overreaction to something that didn't really mean anything. Thank you all so much for doing that. Thank y'all for jumping into the conversation.
Oh my gosh. Tina's got something she
Yeah, I see
wanted to
that.
finish.
Should have. We were rear-ended on someone from over. It was nothing I could control.
Yeah.
But I overreacted and everything. The rest of the day was an overreaction. Yes,
Done that
it
before.
builds from that moment. Exactly, Tina. Anxiety goes up at work because I don't have much support. So being tense, there can lead. Oh yeah, absolutely. That's that, and that. If you look at it, that goes back to a lot of those iceberg pieces as we look at those things. Don't feel ashamed. It's something that we can work on. That ultimately is the thing with this. That ultimately is the first step to moving past and becoming more resilient. The first step is to figure it out. And Betty and I were talking as we were putting this together, and this is the hardest piece of the entire process. According to the authors, according to everything that we have, this is detecting our icebergs is the hardest thing because of exactly, I think, of what was just put. We've seen it twice. Tanya put it in here, and then now Brittany's put it in here, the words, I feel ashamed. We have to find it first before we can ever figure it out. We have to find it. And then we can know what we need to work on. Then we need to know where we can go. Then we need to see what we can have. And this is just really good. And this is so raw and so emotional and so personal. I thank you all for sharing this. And Maggie, I agree with you as well. There are 3 people in my house, and I do not know how we generate so much laundry. There's only 3 people that live here.
Same.
One of them is little. He's 9. His clothes ain't very big. I don't know how we generate so much laundry. We do laundry all day, every day, it seems.
Yep.
And it never gets done. And it's just, it drives you crazy.
Yeah, Teresa said he is the most. Aiden has the most.
Oh,
Yeah, all
okay.
that ball playing and stuff like that. That's right.
All right, very good. Very good. We're going to move forward. All right, so problem with icebergs. They make you over experience certain emotions and under experience others. People that are emotionally resilient, again, this is going to work on that emotional resiliency piece. Emotionally resilient people feel emotions. They feel all the emotions. They're not robots. Again, I did the emotional piece with my coordinators at a regional meeting, and there were a couple of people that scored 0, which was extremely emotional. And then I had some people that scored extremely high. That was like, are you a robot? Because you have no emotion. Resilient people are kind of in the middle. They're kind of even, but we're able to show appropriate emotions to appropriate degrees. Don't get too high, don't get too low, don't do all those things. That's kind of that emotional resiliency. People that are less emotionally resilient tend to get stuck in one emotion. They tend to get stuck in one place. and it compromises their ability to respond productively to adversity. That's a quote from the book. So looking at that, people that are, when they get stuck in an emotion, it's kind of what we were saying a minute ago. Something bad happens and you're stuck there. You're stuck in that emotion for the rest of the day. Something bad happens at work and you're mad the entire day. You feel bad the entire day and you want to put it all, and it ends up bleeding over into everything else. My wife and I do that to each other a lot. My wife's a teacher, so we check each other a lot, especially when we both were working in schools. And it was a lot of times it's, hey, I don't work there. I didn't do it. Let's, kind of reframe, kind of what's going on around, because everything from work does come home with you, whether you want it to or not. It all does come home, and it all does kind of lead into some other stuff. So we're going to move on to, there's a worksheet kind of in your book, talking about detecting our icebergs, and how you do it. And it's using the ABCs, using adversity, beliefs, and consequences. So the first thing you have to do when you're looking at this is, when detecting an iceberg, you have to break down the facts of a situation, break down the facts of the adversity. Then you have to list, what are your ticker tape beliefs? What is it that you're doing? And then what are the consequences of those beliefs? What are the consequences? So we're going to do that in a breakout room. We're going to send you guys back to a breakout room, and we're going to do that very thing. But we're not going to ask you to do that to yourself. We're going to ask you to do that with another family that you have seen, with somebody that you have worked with. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment, and I'm going to give you an example before you leave. Christmas time, holiday assistance time. Parent calls and verbally berates you over the phone because their kid didn't go to the right Christmas sponsor. Emotion did not really go with what was actually going on. So why did they react this way? Why did they look at that? So think of a time when you've worked with somebody else and you can see this in somebody else, when their actions did not match, what was going on around them. So what was the situation? How did they react? What were the consequences? What were the things that were kind of underlying that? All right, Teresa will take another 10 minutes. Oh, and Betty has the questions to kind of ask yourself as you're going through that. And she's put them in the chat, and we can actually broadcast them to you as well. But if you'll look at those, they'll be in your chat. But it is as you're looking at the last piece, what does that mean to me? What is the most upsetting part, for them? What is the worst part? What does that say about them? What's so bad about it? So when we're thinking about the consequences, think about those kind of questions, the what kind of questions. All right, Teresa.
Breakout rooms have been opened.
All right. Anybody have an example? Does anybody have an example they want to share of a parent overreaction or a family overreaction? Okay. So looking at thinking about like the parent overreaction, the difficult piece, the hard piece to this is something that Betty and I really kind of wanted to let you all do at this moment in time. We're going to take just a couple of minutes. Again, we're going to borrow that standards language, that library like quiet, for just a couple of minutes, and think of yourself and think of a time when, it's easy to see it in somebody else, But to kind of culminate everything that we've looked at today, think of a time when we have overreacted of that situation and we acted in kind of a similar way that we're talking about with that parent. And, what were the outcomes? What was it? So take just a minute and kind of like, that's something we can start journaling, just kind of jot some things down. And we'll pick back up at, I guess, like 11:04, 11:05. All right. So thank you all for kind of going through that activity with us. And we're going to pull the PowerPoint back up and we're going to turn it back over to Betty. And she's going to move into the next chapter, which is changing beliefs.
All right. So once again, I'm going to lead with a disclaimer and say that Russell and we do not claim to be experts with these skills, but we hope we can provide some meaningful conversation with them. So challenging beliefs. With challenging beliefs, there are actually, if you don't get what you feel you need from this particular session or from the book, there are actually challenging beliefs worksheets out there. And if you really want to take it to that next level, there's a therapy that you can go through, and it's called cognitive processing therapy. And that's to help you understand your challenging beliefs a little bit better. So what we're going to hit on now are we're moving into those change skills. This is where it gets even more tough because you're digging deeper into your soul and looking at yourself. So we're going to be looking at challenging beliefs today, and in the future, putting things into perspective, calming and focusing, and real-time resilience is something that's going to be covered in the future. So challenging beliefs will help you clarify problems, and it will also help you find better solutions. So when looking at resilience, we're going to look at resilience, and a key component of resilience is problem solving. So think about how effective you are at solving problems. Do you waste time pursuing solutions that don't work? Do you feel helpless to change situations? Do you persist on one problem solving path even when you see that it's not getting you anywhere or where you want to be? I think they call that insanity. I do that a lot. So when something goes wrong, we generally ask ourselves, why questions. We ask those why questions, and we try to understand why something went wrong. When something goes right, we generally don't ask ourselves those why questions. So the faster we identify the true causes of a problem, the faster we can generate a solution. If we identify a wrong cause, then we identify the wrong solution. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at the 7 steps of challenging beliefs. So step 1 is ABC and adversity. So Russell and I came up with an adversity at work as a coordinator. Here's the example. A coordinator has an after-school program and a guardian is late to pick up the student. The coordinator's child, that's you, has a ball game that is occurring while they are waiting for the guardian to pick up the student. So let's talk a little bit about your beliefs and your consequences. Now, beliefs are those ticker tape things that pop into your head. And then you're going to think a little bit about emotional and behavioral consequences. So, Russell, do you think we should give examples, or do you think it's pretty self-explanatory with this?
I think let's let them start with getting the chat with what they think. What's their
The beliefs?
ticker tape belief going to be?
Okay, let's do that first. So the ticker tape belief, what would pop into your head? First thing, you're at school, you did a program, there's a child there with you, you need to be at a ball game with your child, your own personal child, but you can't leave because the guardian hasn't picked up this child and there's nobody else there to stay with the child. What would be in the chat? What would be some of your ticker tape beliefs? Okay, the parent doesn't care if I miss my family events. Absolutely. Anybody else have anything else they want to add? Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Okay. I'm going to read these. My time is less valuable than theirs. My family doesn't matter. The world revolves around them. For me, it would depend on the family. Okay. The parent thinks their time is more important than mine. Chalk it up. I will never do this again. Who forgets their kid? I've said that before. If it is a family who is always on time, I would have empathy first because that is abnormal. Great. Agree, Brittany. Very good. Very good. If it was a family who is always late, I would feel disrespected. Absolutely. Go ahead, Russell.
Brittany brings up a point. Is everything situational? The way we feel of things, does it determine on who it is or what's going on?
And as coordinators, we might know a little bit more about the family too. If we might know a little bit more about the family if that child's staying in our after school program, and understand the mom or dad might be picking up a shift at work. It might be those things. Absolutely. But those ticker tape beliefs are the first things that pop in your head. So that's what you're doing. Let's look at this too. What about your admin at your school? Has that ever happened? Have you ever had any ticker tape beliefs about the admin kind of leaving you in charge and them leaving? Has that ever happened? No? Yes? Okay. Yes. Okay. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so those are some ticker tape beliefs. Yes and no, absolutely. Depends again. Yes, absolutely. So those are those ticker tape beliefs that pop up during an adversity. Right. So the next step of of challenging the beliefs is pie charting the causes. So let's look at these. Let's pick a problem. We've picked the problem. It's the coordinator has an after school program. The guardian's late to pick it up. So let's pick two things. Let's say your admin doesn't really care about your time, or the parents don't respect your time. Let's think about too about your child that's at that ball game. Are you worried about what your child's thinking with you not being there? Yes or no? Are you concerned about that? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Okay. Yes, but thankfully, my kid give me grace. Absolutely. Perfect. So let's think about that. With the pie chart in the book, it talks about charting which thing and looking at changeable things. So with these two situations, say it's with your boss or with the parents, or it's with your child, whose beliefs are you most likely to change? Can you change your boss's or your parents' thoughts? Or can you change your child's thoughts? And I don't have the chat up. Let me check. What are your thoughts? Is it going to be easier to change parents' thoughts, or is it going to be easier to change your child's thoughts? Yes, Brittany, absolutely. Better chance with your kids. So with this pie chart, it talks about figuring out what percentage, if you look in on page 152, and we're not getting into the weeds with this, I promise. If you have your book, 152, it it talks about the percentage, and it talks about to pie chart how much each cause contributed to the adversity according to how you saw the problem at the time. And the percentage should add up to 100%. So take your book and you can look at that, put the percentage, and talk about, is working with that parent, is changing them a certain amount? Is it not changeable? Is it somewhat changeable or highly changeable? So think about that. Okay. Let's move on to the next, challenging our beliefs. And this is to identify your explanatory style. All right. So if you remember this in the book, it's an attribute and it indicates how people explain to yourself why you experience a particular event. It could be either positive or it could be negative. We're going to talk about three different ones here. There's three dimensions, and explanatory styles can hurt our ability to solve our own problems. That's something, if you don't leave with anything today, realize that. So let's look at me versus not me. Are you a me versus or a me or a not me person? So do you see problems as being caused by yourself, or do you see problems being caused by other people? So here's an example the author gives. You're walking down the hallway your boss passes you and the boss says, and you say hi to your boss and the boss doesn't speak. Do you immediately say, oh my goodness, I didn't do that report right? I must have done something wrong. I bet she or he is mad at me. Or do you say, well, I bet he or she's having a bad day? Is it an outside circumstance? Let's look at the second one. Are you always or versus not always? Are you an always or a not always person? So let's look at this one. If you have a disagreement at work with your boss, what is your instant reaction? Is it an always where she's the expert? I must not be good at my job. Or is it a not always? I haven't been paying attention to her hints lately that my work priorities are out of order. And then finally, the everything versus not everything. This is the dimension of this explanatory style that assesses the degree to which you believe the cause of a particular problem, which may affect many areas of your life. So when something like this happens, everything's impacted. Does it affect your work, your marriage, your relationship, your friends? Or would you think that this would have a specific impact on just one thing? So it's important to identify your explanatory style when learning how this is one of the steps in challenging your beliefs. All right, Russell. Now we're going to start coding those styles.
Yeah. So now we're going to look at our example that we had just a minute ago. We're going to look at the example of I'm sure it's a common problem that y'all face every day. I faced it several times myself. Looking at that example of parent is late to come pick up their kid, you have something else that is going on with your family that is going to happen later. We looked at the beliefs, we looked at the consequences, we looked at all of those things. So let's look at why we believe those things. So we saw a lot of, this person doesn't respect our time. This person doesn't, thinks that they're more, everything revolves around them. So as we're looking at coding that, explanatory style, as we're looking at, which one of those does that fall in? Is it me or is it everybody else? We said a minute ago, does the situation dictate how we react? Well, if the situation dictates how we react to things, a lot of times we're letting that outside force impact us instead of us, being our true self, instead of us doing what we're supposed, what we need to do for us. And then we look at, is it always? So this parent was disrespectful of our time. Is it a one-time event or is it a pattern that happens over time? Those are things we have to look at. And I think someone made that comment a minute ago, is that it depends on who the parent is. It depends on who the family is. If it's a family that's never late, you had a little more empathy for them because, it's a unique situation. But now we're looking at it, and is it something that happens all the time? Is it something that happens every now and then? Those type of things. So we have to pick what our own thought was in the moment. We have to pick what our own thought, how we're going to code that. And as we read through the book, as we looked at some things, the big thing that says, what's the best style? What is the best style? Is there a best style? Which one of them is the best? And inherently, there's good and bad in each of those. There's good and bad within each of those styles. There's good and bad within each of the pieces. The thing that we need to do is we need to look at the two next things we're going to talk about. We need to be more flexible and more accurate with the things that are going on around us. So this is a quote from the book about being flexible. If stupidity got us into this mess, then stupidity can get us out. I like that quote. I thought it was really good. But it's about being flexible with the situations. I'll just say nobody knows how to be flexible more than us and Frisk. Nobody knows how to be because we roll with the things that are going on. We find and we see and we do all the different things that are happening. And I always think back, and I know it's kind of recent, I think of COVID. I think of how flexible everybody was with the things that were going on around them. It truly wasn't nobody had ever experienced that. And we were able to be flexible and move and do the stuff that needed to be done. When I think of this, I think of solving a problem. And I think of another quote that we say, what is the definition of insanity? You're doing the same thing over and over and over, expecting a different result. It's exactly what this is. Being flexible. We have to look and think of something different. If you ever notice that you try to solve the same problems with the same strategy every time. And we've all done that at one time or another. We've all done that. We've all relied on the things that have worked in the past or the things that we've always done. A lot of times when you hear the term flexible, you'll hear people say, well, you got to think outside the box. It's hard to think outside the box when our brain has been wired to be in a box, when we've been wired to be in something, when we've always been, conditioned to be in a piece. The book gave the example. I remember this commercial when it happened. Taco Bell had a commercial that said, think outside the bun. I remembered that commercial. I remember looking at that and I thought, how different that was, but realistically it wasn't. I mean, it was just a slogan of thinking outside of the box. But when we start trying to do that, how flexible are we? How rigid are we to our beliefs? Are we able to, let ourselves be flexible when we don't see what a solution is? If we try the old strategy, are we able to do something different? Are we able to help a family in a different way? Are we able to do the things differently that needs to happen with being flexible? And then the last piece is being accurate. And it talks about why beliefs, why we do. So we in all of our situations, when we look at them, we need to be accurate with the information that we have. And it goes back to, I think of the example that we had. What if something happened to the parent? What if the parent was in a wreck? Would we react in a different way? What if, driving down the road, we were talking about a minute ago, a lot of us had that issue of people being slow or getting cut off in traffic and doing all those things. A human reaction is to be upset with what's happening around you. But what we don't know is we can't be accurate with the situation because we don't know why the person did what they did. It's the evidence for things, the evidence against things. So you have to challenge your belief. You have to challenge whatever the belief it is that you have. And you say, this is why I believe this. This is the evidence for it. This is the evidence against it. You have to kind of you kind of become a lawyer against yourself of why I believe this or why I don't believe this, or this is why these people did this. The person was late. Well, they've been late 4 times in the past. They never have a good excuse. Maybe there was a reason for you to be upset. You look at the other piece, they've never been late. Maybe this happened, maybe that happened, all these different things. We have to look at the beliefs, the why things are. Figure out, and there's a chart in your book. I just had it and lost my page in the book. There's a chart in the book that you can use.
164.
On page 164. Thank you, Betty.
You're welcome.
On page 164 in the book. And as you look at it, you put your belief, you put your beliefs on the left, and then you look and you put all the evidence for why you acted the way you did, or why you believed, or what the belief was, that ticker tape belief, why it existed in front of us. And you just list out all the evidence. It's like the old list that we used to do, the pros and the cons of a situation. It's very similar to that. It's very similar to find the things, but instead of it being our assumptions or being our thoughts, it's the true accurate piece for why we did that. Why did we act that way? Why did we respond that way? When in reality, we could be upset over something that happened during lunch and somebody else is going to take the brunt of it. There's a podcast I listen to, and this guy, it's a movie podcast, and I listened to him, and he talked about the situation, and there was a thing that he happened, and it was incredibly uncomfortable. And I listened to it, and I thought, this is so valuable for this. He reacted in this just horrible way on air on his podcast for something that didn't happen, something that didn't go the way he wanted to. But in reality, what really happened was the blow up of emotion to something that didn't happen. Within a month time, the guy had lost a brother, a best friend, maybe an uncle. All had passed away, and he never dealt with it. And eventually it just come out. And eventually it just happened. And that's what that's something this can help with. Why did we react the way we did? Well, maybe we're dealing with grief. Maybe we're dealing with trauma. Maybe we're dealing with something else that is leading to that emotion without, that made that emotion be completely different. So it's going to be changing that belief that we have inside of us. Betty, were you going to add something?
Oh no, I just agreeing with you. Yeah, there's so many layers of different emotions that we carry around with us every day. And if you want to really work on the challenging belief piece, this chapter to me, is complicated, but there are worksheets you can actually Google, and it lays it out perfectly for you. I know we don't have time to do that, but it will really serve as a way of just enlightening yourself on maybe some things that you believe that you didn't realize you believe, and it will help you work through it. I've actually used a couple of them before, and they are very helpful.
So we'll move into the last two steps. The last two steps are, one, you're going to create a new pie chart. You then create, after you go through these steps, you then create a new pie chart to see exactly why you believe the way you believe. And then we come up with new solutions. Because again, being flexible and being accurate is going to help that pie chart. Being accurate is going to help really determine what is causing the emotion, what is causing the ticker tape piece that we see. Why is it that way? Secondly, it was then finally the new solutions. That's where being flexible is going to come into play. Being flexible to look and see what it is that we need to do, see how we can get through the situations that we have. So that is, I think, going to wrap it up for Betty and I today. We do know that in 2 weeks, we have Maggie and Melissa Newton are going to finish us out throughout the rest of the book. They're going to finish the rest of the way. And then at VOV, we are going to have a live in-person session at VOV where hopefully we can come and meet with you guys, and we're going to look at the end of the book. We're going to look at how we can make that more prevalent right now in the different ways that we can, the different positions we have in life, the different places. So that is it. Maggie, Betty, Teresa, anything y'all like to say before we close out?
No, Melissa Newton's on vacation. So I know normally after we have these sessions, she sends out like the evaluation and the approval code and all that sort of thing. So I'm gonna go out there and say that she probably will do that next week when she comes back. So everybody can be looking for that email next week. It probably won't happen in the next little bit since she's on vacation. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you all.
Yep. Thank you all for being with us.
Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right, I guess I need to stop.